The more I watch of Arteta, the more I appreciate how intelligent he really is. If you ever listen to a professional coach, a manager, talk about football, and you compare that to 4321 Tactical Tim on Twitter, it's night and day. Sucking on the teat of Pep Guardiola, just praying. I don't think he's lying when he says that there were 47 different formations in certain games. Arteta has 11 different ways to win a game. Right, and we are live. Welcome to the first episode of The First 45. It's a weekly podcast that I'm going to be doing every week, hence the name Weekly. And basically a football podcast that we're going to split into two, much like a football match. The first half of the podcast, we're going to do the pre-show and we're going to cover the weekend's biggest game. More of an in-depth, in detail, tactical breakdown, big talking points from the specific game, just so that I can talk football for a longer period of time, unedited, unscripted, because I feel a lot of my videos, as good as they are, self-proclaimed, I think that it's beneficial for me to, just get better, really, at not only analysing football, but also just talking to anyone that's watching, and giving my thoughts, opinions, and sort of trying my best to understand elite tactical coaches in the Premier League, or at least the Premier League for now. You never know, we might expand in the future, but probably not. But let's jump right in to the pre-show, a segment that we're going to do every single week, of the biggest talking points of the weekend's football. And first up, we have the Merseyside derby. Liverpool came away from the derby, a 2-0 win over Everton. I thought that Sean Dyche's Everton have been putting in better performances over the last couple of weeks, and that was no different at Anfield. I thought they set up well and actually stifled a lot of what Liverpool wanted to do. Salah had a really poor performance actually at Anfield, and yet he was the one that got on the score sheet twice, scoring a penalty and obviously that breakaway goal from, I think it was an Everton throw-in, but he ghosted pretty much Mikalenko on that left-hand side. Really stopped him from doing anything. Salah had a few poor touches, but that just shows his class and how good Salah is. He can have a game, probably the worst game I've seen Salah have, since like at the Emirates a year ago, if you can remember that game. It wasn't a good performance, but coming away with 2 goals, what can you do? Gravenberch, I wanted to highlight. I think the Gravenberch is an absolute steal at 35 million of the summer. A lot of Liverpool fans were worried sort of about this kid, because I think he's 21 years old, and there'd been sort of murmurs or rumors that his attitude and maybe his willingness to commit to clearly the talent that he has was questioned. But everything that I've seen of him since he's arrived on Merseyside has just been him smiling and him enjoying himself. And I rate him so highly. I think he's only 21 years old and he's got bags of talent. And I'm saying this now. I think has possibly the best half turn in the Premier League. Or give it a year and he will have the best half turn in the Premier League. This kid is unbelievable on the half turn. The way he shifts his body left or right, can commit a midfielder to the press and just skip away. Honestly, it is world class at times. I think he still does have a lot of room tactically for me to sort of improve, maybe like game management and obviously getting up to the speed of the Premier League, because he did not make that many appearances for Bayern Munich. But it's an absolute steal for 35 million, and he was class on the weekend against Everton. Another midfielder came on for Gravenberch, I want to say, was Harvey Elliott. I thought he put in a really good cameo last 15-20 minutes. He has this really great ability to read the game from the bench and then attack the game when he comes on. Obviously, with the talent that he has and sort of, the hope around Anfield that what he can go on and do, you want him to be starting week in and week out. And he isn't being bred to be an off the bench player. But at the minute, the role that he sort of has off of the bench, affecting games in the second half a lot of the time, is really, really impressive. Again, 20 years old. We're talking about midfielders at Liverpool here. Harvey Elliott, 20 years old. Gravenberch, 21. Szoboszlai, 22. Endo, 45, I think. I'm not too sure. But such a young midfield, which is such a drastic contrast to Hendo and Milnable that I had to watch throughout last season. Honestly, it's a privilege to watch these guys play football after some of the monstrosities that happened last season. And finishing off on the Merseyside derby, was Konate lucky not to be sent off? For me, I think either way, whatever decision was to be given, I think it would have been a contentious one. It wasn't a particularly rash challenge from Konate. He sort of just commits to the press and the guy just nicks away from him. So obviously, being a Liverpool fan, I'm going to say if he was to get sent off, it was going to be harsh. But it's about time that we got, some refereeing decisions go our way. I think I looked this up, right? So there's last season, in every Liverpool match, there were only 2 red cards that just happened in the match. And not just for Liverpool, just in the match, there were 2 red cards in the entirety of last season. This season, there's been 5. So, I always enjoy games where there's 22 men on the pitch, like football was intended, like God made football, 22 men on the pitch. Obviously, the Merseyside derby didn't have that. Ashley Young got sent off I thought the second yellow was a little harsh. It is a sending off because he was stupid to even commit to that tackle for Diaz. You don't make that tackle after 20 minutes of being booked early on in the first half. You just don't. So in that way, you kind of deserve to be sent off. But if that was just a challenge on its own, it isn't a yellow card. So felt a little harsh at the time, but Ashley Young he's a far more experienced player. He should know better than that. We'll move on, though, to Monday's fixture. Tottenham got a 2-0 victory over Fulham. And we need to ask ourselves the question, are we starting to take Tottenham seriously? We're 9 games in. Ange Postecoglou, I think, has had the best start of any new manager. So his first 9 games in the Premier League, he has the best record, picking up 23 points. And I think it's Tottenham's best start as well. So it's been an incredible beginning to the season for Spurs, winning 7, drawing 2, unbeaten so far in the league. But of course, being a hater, and after the shitstorm that happened with Liverpool the other week, I have devised a little list at this pre-show to try and, just bring Spurs down a peg or two. So obviously, currently we're 9 games in, 23 points, 5 wins, 7 wins, 2 draws. Excellent start. They're first, top of the table. Will they go on and challenge for the title? Well, history says not. I'd like to take you back to 2005, 2006, 9 games in. 18 points, so not far off their total at this point. 5 wins, 3 draws, just the 1 loss, and they sat in second. Where did they finish that season? 5th. So, but that was a long time ago. Let's bring it closer to reality. 18-19, 9 games, 21 points. 7 wins, 0 draws, and 2 losses, and they sat in 5th position, right? But the table was very tight, but they had 21 points. Where did they finish in that season? 4th. So not quite first, but that's all right. 17-18, 9 games in, 20 points this time around. So just the 3 less. but 6 wins, 2 draws, and of course the singular loss. And they sat in third after 9 games. Sounds like a good start to me. But where did they fit? They finished third, 23 points behind first. Okay. Ooh, that's all right. We'll start. Let's move even closer, shall we? Let's come into the 2020s. 2020 to 2021, 9 games in, 20 points, 6 wins, 2 draws, and a loss. And Tottenham, of course, sat in first. This was under Jose Mourinho. And we all asked ourselves the question, under Jose Mourinho, will they win the league? They finished 7th that year. So if you are beginning to worry, really, that are Tottenham going to win the league, history would suggest no. Don't shoot the messenger. They are the facts. So that was my little times Tottenham looked really good but weren't. So let's move on to the last topic of course, just the pre-show. Bloody hell, right. Were Bournemouth right to sack Gary O'Neill? Now, Wolves picked up a 2-1 win versus Bournemouth. Gary O'Neill going back to where he got his first managerial start. And of course, he got sacked at the end of last season and they brought in Iriola. And now Wolves, managed by Gary O'Neill, sit in 12th. And Bournemouth, managed by the new fancy, shiny Spanish, I don't know if he's shiny, manager, sit in 19th. But everyone's saying, right, that Gary O'Neill shouldn't have been sacked from Bournemouth and that look at what he's doing now. And I don't really agree, right? Bournemouth weren't good under Gary O'Neill by any stretch of the imagination. He did an excellent job keeping them up because he's a talented coach, right? On a very small budget down on the South Coast. And they stayed up, but they were bad and really bad. Like they sacked Scott Parker, I think 4 games into last season, I think. And Gary O'Neill took over since then. And they were not good. Bournemouth, I don't know why people think that Bournemouth were just going to go from strength to strength under Gary O'Neill. The reason Gary O'Neill is doing this well at Wolves, and he is doing brilliantly, is yes, he's a talented coach. I think an underrated English coach, and his insight on Monday Night Football is really interesting. But it's because Wolves have a better team. Wolves have a 3 times as better team as Bournemouth. They just do. Neto alone is better than anything Bournemouth have to offer up front. So were they right to sack Gary O'Neill? It was harsh, but I don't think Gary O'Neill would be doing much better. Maybe not 19th, but much better. Anyway, let's jump into the first half of the podcast. We're going to be breaking down the biggest game of the weekend. And of course, it comes at Stamford Bridge. Chelsea drawing 2-2 to Arsenal. A game in which Chelsea went 2-0 up after 47 minutes. And of course, Arsenal got that late comeback and picked up a point. Some are saying a true champions performance from Arsenal, picking up points when they definitely shouldn't have. But I've watched the game, weirdly enough, and I don't think Arsenal were all too bad. I thought it's a credit to Mauricio Pochettino how his team started the game. They started with a really high intensity with that normal 4-4-2 press that we're seeing from a lot of teams, sort of in their mid-block to stop teams that really favour possession, like the likes of Arsenal and Manchester City, even Tottenham at times. And I think Palmer and Gallagher, the two up top, did brilliantly, really, in pressing Arsenal. They started off sort of pressing the 2 double sixes of Arsenal. I'm going to speak about this build-up formation in a new video, but We're sort of seeing this introduction of the goalkeeper becoming a right-sided or left-sided, either one, centre-back in build-up, where the other centre-back sort of hugs the touchline, and you create this back four. And then naturally you have the 2 6s that are going to come deep and try and receive the ball off of that back line. And Chelsea really just stuck Palmer and Conor Gallagher on those 2 6s, really stopped Arsenal progressing through the thirds like they like to. And just the intensity in which Chelsea started this game, I think, took Arsenal by surprise. They weren't able to settle into the game as much as they wanted to. And of course, it meant that Chelsea ended up going 1-0 up after a handball decision from Saliba. It is a handball. Anyone saying that it isn't a handball is a bit silly. You can't have your arm out here while defending. It's unfortunate. It's annoying. It probably does go against your natural body position. But his body position in the first place when defending the cross wasn't correct anyway. So that led him to diving, lunging forward, and obviously having the arm out. But for me, definitely a penalty. Palmer slots it away brilliantly. A little confusion as to who was going to take the penalty there, but Palmer scored really nicely. It was the first goal that I think Arsenal have conceded away from home this season, and it comes from Cole Palmer, who, just 3 months ago was sucking on the teat of Pep Guardiola, just praying for 5 minutes in a Carabao Cup round 3 game, but now he's scoring goals against Arsenal, so good luck to him. So really struggling to play through midfield. Obviously, Arteta, the more I watch of Arteta, the more I appreciate how intelligent he really is. I was a hater, and still am a little bit of a hater of Mikel Arteta. I don't agree with the amount of hyping up that he's had over the past 12 to 18 months, other than the fact he's literally not won anything, apart from... He won an FA Cup 3 years ago, while he was finishing 8th and getting knocked out by Nottingham Forest in the Carabao Cup, right? So, to me, he ain't won nothing, right? And he certainly has a tendency for his teams to crumble under pressure. But that's positive nature for Mikel Arteta, because he's constantly changing the system. I don't think he's lying when he says that there were 47 different formations in certain games, because if you're watching the fluidity in which the likes of Rice and Zinchenko and Jorginho are pulling back and forth, there's not a solid double six. There's sometimes a 1 and a 2. There's Rice coming as an 8, which we'll speak about a little bit later. There's Zinchenko coming in as a sole 6. It's so fluid in the build-up that it doesn't surprise me when he says things that he had 703 formations in the first half. I thought around 20 minutes, Arsenal started to get into the game. And Rice actually pushed into, speaking of the sort of fluid nature of his midfield, Rice pushed into this 8 position. At the start of the season, we were all thinking that Havertz was going to be the one that sort of became that left-sided 8 that Xhaka was so good at. But it looks like it's Rice that, if he's not coming deep as a sort of joint 6, he's pushing a lot further, sort of wide and higher in that 8 position, almost at times looking to get in behind. It's something that we really haven't seen from Rice during his West Ham days, but I've seen it a lot for Arsenal. And Zinchenko, so as they were trying to get through the midfield, and obviously Palmer and Gallagher were stopping these 2 double 6s, Rice instead drops to that or gets higher into that 8, and Zinchenko actually, as they begin to gain a little bit of control, drops actually between the 2 centre-backs, which is a little bit confusing at first, the way that it is. But I believe the centre-back split and the Zinchenko sit sort of in between them. And I was actually reading or listening to a thing from Pep Guardiola. It was really interesting that explains the reason why a player would do that, because you assume when a player drops deep, it's just dropping deep to receive the ball. So they're not waiting to receive the ball. They're going to the ball rather than the ball coming to them. But there's actually more detail to this sort of movement. Zinchenko moves deeper, receives the ball in between the centre backs, but it's about receiving the ball rather than receiving the ball. When you've got 2 6s, often you're receiving the ball with your back to play, so you're putting your studs on the ball and you've got a player in behind you, which naturally then your field of vision is either wide or goalkeeper centre back, whereas if you split that and you actually have the receiver receive on the first line of the defense rather than alongside the centre backs, and you receive it slightly on the half turn, Zinchenko actually had a little bit more time to actually turn, and then he has a field of vision in front of him, if that makes sense. So rather than trying to receive it forward and asking for it here, he came alongside his centre backs, received it so he could turn and face the play. And Zinchenko has got a beautiful pass on him. And that's when Arsenal started to pop the ball about a little bit nicer and look for those balls into the channels from the likes of Rice and Odegaard, who I think went a little bit missing during this game. But actually Chelsea answered this really quick adjustment from Arteta's team really quickly, and they switched to a 4-3-3, which actually more looked like a 4-2-1-3. So because Zinchenko was sat in between the two centre backs, they had the three that were then pressing these three, Gabriel, Zinchenko, and Saliba, and then the one would sit into anyone then that would come deep. So Zinchenko's pulled really deep alongside his centre backs, and then the one would sort of shield this half space at the three of left. I don't know if any of this is making sense, but so that was the 4-2-1-3, which looked like a 4-3-3 depending on, but that was more of a higher, a more advanced block. The reason that the thing that you don't want Arsenal to be able to do, and which Chelsea did really well in that first half, and what it is, you don't want Arsenal to basically get on the halfway line. You do not want Arsenal to progress their centre-backs on the halfway line. And if you can keep them a sort of mid-block, I find that that's when they begin to struggle. I think they have the capability of going long at times, which we'll speak about in the second half of this game. They had the ability to go long, especially with Havertz. But in that sort of mid-block area, if you can really keep the centre-back sort of 20 yards away from the halfway line and disrupt the movement of the likes of Zinchenko, making him come really deep alongside the centre-back, it helps. Like Zinchenko's got a brilliant pass, but you're able to adapt to it a little bit easier than when you're 30 yards behind your own, in front of your box. So that was a good adjustment from Pochettino. It was really interesting seeing these little chess moves so early on in the first half, and clearly Arsenal were asking the questions, but Chelsea continued to answer them, which was really impressive. The highlight for Chelsea in this game, like I said, was Palmer, Gallagher and Enzo. I thought they are so intelligent. I think Palmer's just got so much energy. So is Conor Gallagher. I think his tactical intelligence is really underrated. I think he gets sort of brushed with the idea that he is just an energetic 8 that sort of just pops around and runs around a bit like a headless chicken. But actually his pressing intelligence in this game was really good in terms of when they were pressing high in a sort of higher block, or when they went to that mid block in the 4-4-2 or 4-2-1-3, depending on what Arsenal were doing. So yeah, summarizing that first half, Chelsea, a lot of intensity, took Arsenal a little bit by surprise. Arsenal tried to gain control, couldn't. That's when Zinchenko dropped in between the lines, popped the ball into Rice in that 8, and Rice started to get a little bit more just sort of space really in that 8 half space. But it wasn't enough to pick up a goal in the first half. We move on to the second half, and I've just been praising Zinchenko for the last for the last 10 minutes in terms of how intelligent his movement was and his passing that began to gain a little bit control for Arsenal. Arteta took him off. Arteta took him off for Tomiyasu, which basically made all my notes a bit useless. Which obviously, as good as the Ukrainian was in moving deeper, he was a little bit vulnerable defensively. And that is a question that is always going to be asked of him. How good is he as an actual left back? I think he's excellent in midfield, plays there for his country, and really intelligent in terms of where the space is, where to pick up the ball, how to pick up the ball. But defensively, he struggled once again, which is becoming a little bit all too common in his game. Tomiyasu came on, and actually, Arteta changed something, slightly in the beginning of the second half, bringing on Tomiyasu. And actually, rather than, now you don't have Zinchenko to drop really deep in between your two centre-backs, actually, Arteta tried to open up slightly different passing angles that, if you're six or whatever you want to call them, dropped actually to a right-sided centre-back. So rather than being in between your two centre-backs, it actually comes as the third one, essentially. And this actually was the reason that they conceded their second so early on in the second half. Jorginho sits in as a right-sided centre-back, as a different passing angle, and it meant that Chelsea actually, when they gained possession back, it meant that they could break down that side of the pitch really easily, because if you've got Jorginho coming in as that right-sided centre-back, it meant that Ben White could push up a lot higher, create those doubles with Saka, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. And it basically left that flank really open. Jorginho does not have the pace to get back. And if you watch that goal back, Conor Gallagher picks up the ball, basically sprints 30, 40 yards. And, now you've got a mess. Now you don't know who's tracking who. You've got Conor Gallagher, Mikel Arteta running down the left. Jorginho, I think, looks to... Basically, Jorginho and White look to stop Conor Gallagher. They don't track the run of Mudryk. He picks up the ball. And, did he mean the chip? There, you can sort of see him look up right before he hits it. I'm not too sure. It was, either way, it was an impressive goal. I don't particularly like Chelsea, especially after all the shit that happened in the transfer window. But there is something that kind of makes me want that kid to do well. Do you know what I mean? Because he has been slaughtered over the past few months, and he just celebrated, just looking at the crowd, a little bit Jude Bellingham-esque. Although, side note, right, we'll get back onto the tactics in a minute, that just arms being out isn't Jude Bellingham. There is a specific Jude Bellingham does this. This is a starfish. That's not Jude Bellingham. This is Jude Bellingham. Like, praise me. Just having your arms out isn't called the Jude Bellingham. There we are. So Jorginho drops into that right-sided centre-back, leaves that flank completely open, and Chelsea go on to score. But then since that goal, I think Arsenal were the better team pretty much the rest of the second half. They picked up far more possession and started to control the game. So many tactical changes. Arteta has 11 different ways to win a game. Like, there's so many different formations and changes and substitutions that I don't know fuck all about football, right? I just try my absolute best to understand it to the highest possible ability that I can. And even through my limited knowledge of understanding what's going on and the parts that are moving, the amount of shit that just changes is within the space of the 20 minutes. I'm writing down here that the Jorginho is dropping in as right-sided centre-back. Arsenal go and concede, and instantly that's fucked off. That doesn't happen for the rest of the game. That literally happened once throughout the whole game. They conceded from it, never happened again. They make their substitutions. We got the likes of Emil Smith-Rowe coming on, Trossard. And essentially, for me, I was confused with the Tomiyasu substitution on the ball. Arsenal are having trouble progressing the ball. Tomiyasu shores them up defensively, but doesn't help them progress the ball in the way that I thought they struggled. But actually, when it gets to the sort of latter stages of the second half, after Rice had got one back through that stupid mistake from Sanchez, actually the substitution of Tomiyasu made a lot of sense. He dropped in as that double six quite often if they had the opportunity alongside Jorginho. But actually, I think that Tomiyasu isn't that. Tomiyasu is not the type of player that can drop in he doesn't have the ability to turn on the half turn. His body position's a little bit awkward when he receives the ball in that position. I literally think the whole reason for that is to basically arc a run to then come inside, draw out a player, which leaves the eights free. So essentially, Arsenal, a lot of the time, I see this so often throughout their matches, they operate almost as twos in pairs everywhere on the pitch. You have those double sixes, you have the fullbacks and the wingers, you have the eights and the wingers, you have the striker comes maybe deep with a centre midfielder, the striker joins up with the right-sided winger. They operate in pairs so often, which I think obviously creates overloads, creates 2v1s. I think it's just constantly about creating 2v1s in areas. So with Tomiyasu coming deep, drawing a midfielder out, I think it just opens up that passing lane to an 8. And very often we were seeing the 8s get on the ball a little bit more. Hence why we saw, I think Emil Smith-Rowe, who I think is really talented in between the lines. And that sort of led to Arsenal gaining more possession, gaining more control. But actually, then they brought on Havertz again in that 8 position. But this is something about Havertz, man. He isn't a technically brilliant finisher. He, I think, struggles in a lot of games that involve sort of counter-attacking or like back and forth basketball games. I think he gets lost a lot in those games. But he does provide value. And this game was no different. Arsenal were able to go long with Havertz. Havertz is brilliant at back to goal, holding up play. It gives Arsenal the ability to go long, and that's how they got their equaliser. Raya looks to go long. Havertz can't quite bring it down. It gets cleared, and that just basically means Arsenal can progress up the pitch. Like we said, you cannot have Arsenal push up onto your halfway line. Saka receives the ball and puts in a beautiful cross to the back post of Trossard, and they get their equaliser, and they could have got a third. Arteta was changing so many things, and I think Mauricio Pochettino did really well in that first half to answer a lot. He looked for those long balls into the channels. I think he was always looking for the second ball because it's so difficult to play through Arsenal. Answered a lot of questions that Arteta was putting out there, but I think in the end it just sort of caught up to him. I think there was just so many moving parts that eventually, it has to come to an end, and Chelsea, lost out on a 2-0 head start, essentially, they had at Stamford Bridge. Jumping into the second half of the podcast, let me know what you thought of the game of the weekend. Let me know, was there anything tactically I missed? Are there any big talking points that I missed? I didn't talk about, obviously, that Sanchez mistake. I just find it all a bit fucking boring, to be honest with you. But let's jump into the second half of the podcast. This is an opportunity, basically, for me to talk about anything that I want football-wise, really, just so, you might know more about me, or just so we can have a little bit of chat about some of the funnier stuff, some of the, some of the shit that's been happening in the football world recently. But we're starting off self-indulgent this week. This week's, we're going to talk about my footballing history. Why do I like football? Have I played football? Have I? And if I have, how well? And have I ever played for an academy? Spoiler, that is a no. So yeah, we're gonna be. I want to chat about my footballing experience and shit that I've done in my footballing career that lasted probably about 4 years, I would say. So obviously, I've always played football. There's no, obviously. But I didn't actually join a Sunday league team. I hadn't played a competitive game of football until the age of 13. I played football consistently before that, but I hadn't played a competitive game of football till the age of 13, where I played my first 11-a-side game. Before that, I was a big garden footballer. I was actually a goalkeeper when I was younger. Not literally, again, not played the game yet, but like I love being in goal. We had this big goal in the garden, just launch balls at me, footballs, and I was actually, I'm not gonna lie, a bit of a cat, a bit light on my feet, can get down low, a bit of a diving save, didn't mind one for the cameras. I was all right for 9. Got a lot of them, hit me in the crotch, which I found out hurts less than it does now. So, do that information what you will. But yeah, so I the only sort of footballing experience I had was like literally like I enjoyed football. I watched football from the age of my first footballing memory was the 2011 or 12. That's bad of me. 12 Carling Cup final, Liverpool Cardiff. That penalty shootout. That's my first footballing memory, and it's barely a memory, as you can tell. So I've watched football. I've supported Liverpool the whole time. The first season, like specific, like full season, I remember was the 2013-14 season where we narrowly missed out on the league. I actually vividly remember I think Manchester City won the league that year against West Brom, I believe. And I think I remember that evening realizing that, we hadn't won. And I was really sad because we were really good that year. Big match of the day fan. Before then, I was match of the day fan, like probably since like 2011. Like I recorded match of the day every single weekend. I ended up having, like, no joke, like 100 episodes just recorded, and being slightly autistic, I would just start the latest one and just work my way down to the newest one. So I'd just be watching 2012 football in 2015. So that's fun. But yeah, but in terms of playing football, my only really competitive experience was either like birthday parties, got invited to lots of them, where they'd set up, they'd get coaches in, not coaches, adults with authority, really, and gave us exercises, footballing exercises, not just dropping in me 20, footballing exercises, and then you play a little match or something, or you do a crossbar challenge, or was that even crossbar challenge? Probably wasn't a thing in 2010, was it? But yeah, penalty shootouts, or I remember in the summer holidays being a fucking anxious child, right, that didn't like any social interaction whatsoever. For some reason, consistently in the summer, I'd be signed up for willingly to the like football camps, like a week camp at like not those camps, like the like so like the 5-a-side pitches, the AstroTurfs, I think it was called Goals, right? And I'd be signed up, and you'd go, and I wouldn't make any friends because I didn't, either people were like a lot older than me, or like I didn't really like talking to. I had my sandwich, and that was about it. And you'd go out onto the AstroTurf, and it would just be like just a day of football. And I remember I wasn't very good because I wasn't like in any of the clubs. Like I was playing with people that were like in academies, like at the age of 9. Like I was playing with these people, just came down for, to bully people like me who were just starting, right? I was playing just next to these guys. I would just get bullied the whole time. I wasn't very good. It was either people older than me or people younger than me that were better than me. In my little shin pads, in my England top, I had one football top. I had one football kit. I had the England. There's been a million England kits. The white one, weirdly enough, with the collar and the red England badge, if that even equates to, one England top. I had that kit with massive fuck off shin pads for my tiny legs that would like wrap around your calf, like the Velcro ones that would wrap around your calf, with big socks. I'm pretty sure like I didn't have England socks. I think I just had big socks. I was so yeah, that was my only, actually, up until the age of 13, that was my only experience of football, either kicking about in the garden. I didn't even play at school. I literally didn't play a competitive game of football until the age of 13, and doing like birthday parties or these like week football camps where I just wouldn't be very good and I'd get bullied. But then I actually like moved schools, right? And started playing football like at lunch times and things like that. And like, I'm just going to preface this whole thing, right? When I say I was good at football, I don't mean I was good, right? I just mean that like average school, if you took every boy in each year group, right? In my year group at the time, every boy, I was probably bracket top 25%, right? So I wasn't good compared to the level of the country of football. I wasn't good, right? But in my year group, I was probably like top 30%, maybe. Well, 34%, 36%, I was probably there, right? So yeah, so I started playing and I was like half decent. And then everyone, loads of people just kept saying like, oh, we've got a Sunday League team. Like, you should join the Sunday League team. And again, being like an anxious kid I don't want to, like, that's the whole reason I was just like scared of not being good and that sort of environment. I was like, no. And then I ended up getting, convinced to do it. So there was 2 Sunday League teams, right? There was the good one and the not so good one, right? And basically all of my friends were in the technically not so good one. It sounds bad, right? But it's true, right? There was a good one and there wasn't a good one. And they were in the not so good one. Good footballers, but unfortunately in the not so good team. And I remember this one guy said, oh, you should come along to practice. Practice, like I'm American. And it was the good team. And I didn't realize that until I obviously got there and started training. Just went along for like a taster session, literally my first ever like footballing training session with a team ever, and I was in the better bracket. It went okay, and I got in essentially. So I literally, and then like the next week I was playing a professional. I was playing a proper like competitive game, and I just skipped. You're supposed to go at the entry team and then get promoted to the better team. I just skipped, having no footballing experience, literally not kicking a ball in an 11-side game ever, and I went to the better team, which I paid for. I cannot describe to you the feeling of being stood on a football pitch at age 13 and going, oh my God, I've seen this on the telly. Like I can't, like, it sounds stupid, right? Because then like, you think back to when you're 13 and you're like, oh yeah, that's really young, like what? But like all of these kids on this, everyone there had been playing football since they were like 10, 9, 8, 7. Like they'd all done it. So whether or not you were playing like 11 aside at 12, you probably aren't. You're probably playing like 9 aside or whatever, or 7 aside. But at least then you like have a position and a job to do, and you understand like team dynamic. I know none of this, and I've been put in like out of 6 leagues or 5 leagues, we were in the third league essentially, and I was in the better team in my town, and I was just put on the wing and just fucking go and hope that you do well. So I just remember the game was just flying by me. I didn't really know what to do. Luckily, the first half I was on the side of the manager, so he was sort of in my ear. And I have this memory of like, I think it was like 4 games in, right? So I'm just learning shit, trying to get better. And I think the only reason to this day I think I stuck around is because I had good ability, but I think the only reason that like I was consistently picked, because I ended up becoming like a decent starter. Like I was pretty much starting every week. Subbed off at 60, but it's fine. But I think the only reason was just hard work, essentially. Like I actually like wanted to get better. But yeah, I have this vivid memory of like 4 games in, my 4th ever professional game, and I'm on the wing, and the manager's like, get some white paint on your boots. Come on, get white paint on your boots. And I like look down and go like, where's the paint? Why do I need paint on my boots? And I remember like looking and going, and he like dragged me and was like, no, you stand on the side, like get paint on you, like get wide. That's what that means. Get wide, stand on the touchline and get wide. And I was just like, why do I need paint on I thought my boots are cool. I had like green boots. I thought my boots were cool. Which is embarrassing. So yeah, first season went well-ish. Scored a couple. Probably the best game I had in that season was against top of the league, which fucking bit of a brag, that, innit? But like scored 2 away from home against those lot. That was fun. Actually had a bit of a blinder. And then next season, I think I had 4 seasons. I can't remember. Can't even remember. Yeah, so I think we missed out on the title that year. No. Can't even remember. But so yeah, so best game I ever had was, so it was I can't remember I think it was against a team full of giants. So this is the thing when you're playing Sunday League, right? Everyone's rocked up. This was getting to the point now, so we're like 16, 17, I think, and this isn't that long ago. 16, I think. So people are now coming in with hangovers, right? Underage drinking is now becoming prominent in my locker room. So yeah, people are coming in with hangovers. People don't really want to be there half the time. But we're coming up against a team of giants, right? I was not tall and continue not to be. We came up against a team of giants, and I was put on the right wing, which is where I played most games unless I was put up top. And I was against this absolute rapid fucker who was like 6'3", like lanky. These lanky guys that just will like whack elbows in your face. This guy was, and I just, for some reason that day, I weren't having it, right? I was not having it. And I'm gonna say it, I put in an absolute shift that day, right? I was sick, right? I was actually kind of like, I basically, a lot, right? No one's ever gonna fucking watch this. If anyone ever on that team stumbles upon this podcast and you think I'm talking about you, I probably am, and I'm apologizing, right? My fullbacks weren't all too capable, right? So I had to tuck in a lot, right? And do a lot of the dirty work for them, or constantly telling them to pick up their man or push. Like, it was so I just basically didn't have it. And I dominated this right wing. Like, I had an absolute blinder of a game. This dude, I played basically right back the entire game because we were not getting forward. And I shut down this right-hand side, so much so that he moved to the other side. Yeah, it was like the first ever experience I've ever had of like flow state, which sounds like really like fucking, like I'm a knob, but like when everything is just going right for you, you're just in, like, everything's going right, you're in the right positions, you feel quicker, you feel sharper. It was sick. And the only reason like I actually still remember this game and actually like feel proud about it, because it's literally my only footballing achievement, is because they that the opposition come up and, oh, good game, And I remember the opposition manager specifically came up to me and put his arm around me like for a chat and was just like, mate, you put in an absolute shift. Like that's like that is class. You're gonna, I think he said like you're gonna, do really well, which, didn't quite work out, but it's fine. But yeah, I'm proud of it. That was my best game probably ever. Yeah, that's my Sunday league experience, really. Didn't play a competitive game until I was 13. Ended up doing half decent based off hard work and actually showing up without a hangover. And yeah, had a couple of good games, scored a few goals. And now the more I played football, the more I realized I love tactical elements of the game and like reading a game and understanding it. And I just found myself I didn't have the ability to play every position on the pitch, but I found myself wanting to be every position on the pitch because I had an idea of where I'd want people to move and how I'd want us to press, being like 14 and thinking like, we're not quite pressing in the right areas here. We need to squeeze, we're losing the ball and we're not high enough to win it back. I'm thinking all these things at the age of 15 years old. But yeah, that's sort of why I'm interested in the tactical elements now, because I'm not technically good enough to be anywhere close to, tying the boots of someone that couldn't make it professional. I feel like I could get a lot better and more intelligent on the tactical aspect of the game. And I hope if you got to the end of this podcast, right, I hope that sticking around for this channel, I provide you some knowledge of like tactical aspects of the game, something a little bit different, because so many people, I'm going to talk about this in another podcast, right? But so many people on Twitter chat shit about tactics. If you ever listen to a professional coach, a manager talk about football, and you compare that to 4321 Tactical Tim on Twitter, right? Talk about football. It's night and day. They're just drawing shapes and lines. And that's what I do right now because that's the best I've got for you, right? But it's so night and day. So I'm just trying to not only not present to you like I actually know. I know what I'm saying is correct because I can show you evidence. But I'm not giving you, definitive, this is why this game was won and lost. Do you get what I mean? So I know I'm not chatting shit because I can show you the evidence of Zinchenko dropping deep. I can show the evidence of how the eights worked with the wingers to create. So I can show you all of this, but I don't want to come across like I know any better than any of you. Anyway, that's the end of this podcast. A bit of a waffle, right? I wanted to do it mainly to feel like anyone that watches my channel gets to know me a bit more, but also so I can talk about football. Because I like talking about football, really. That's the end of the podcast. The first 45, the first podcast. Yeah, and I shall see you next week for the Halloween special. Enjoy your week, enjoy the football, and I'll be back next week.